of centuries past was a monument rooted, unmoving, etched with virtues like stoicism, strength, silence, and sacrifice. He was the one who provided without complaint, protected without fear, and led without hesitation. His role was defined not by opinion but by necessity. In war he fought. In peace he labored. He did not seek to express, he sought to endure. Society carved this figure from stone and asked him to never change shape. But stone, when cracked, does not bend, it breaks. Today, those archetypes lie in ruins, buried beneath the shifting sands of progress, psychology, and politics. What was once considered masculine is now questioned, dismantled, and in many cases discarded. The man who does not cry is told he is emotionally stunted. The man who does cry is told he is too soft. The provider is seen as outdated, the dreamer as unrealistic. He is expected to be sensitive but not weak, assertive but not aggressive, driven but not domineering. This new maze of contradictions is not a path forward. It is a trap, invisible and psychological. This collapse is not merely cultural, it is existential. When the scaffolding of identity is torn away, confusion fills the vacuum. The modern man is no longer sure what to emulate. The heroes of old, Spartans, samurais, workers with weathered hands, are seen as relics. The new models, often curated influencers, emotional theorists, or hollow caricatures presented through the glowing screens of phones. A man once found himself in the world. Now he scrolls through it, trying to decode his place among images, trends, and shifting algorithms. He is less a participant in a tradition and more a contestant in a game with ever-changing rules. And yet, this is not freedom. This is not liberation from roles. It is exile from clarity. The absence of archetypes does not remove pressure, it redistributes it. It forces every man to construct his own blueprint without guidance, often without language. He becomes a sculptor carving blindfolded, striking at himself without knowing what he's trying to shape. What results is often a fragmented self, constantly pivoting between masks, unsure which face is real and which is required. In the past, masculinity was a duty. Now it is a question. This question haunts in silence. It echoes not in political debates, but in the eyes of young men who feel displaced in schools, discouraged in workplaces, and invisible in relationships. They are told to be allies, but also leaders, to be gentle, but also bold, to take responsibility, but not control. The effect is paralysis, not progress. This man is no longer expected to conquer the external world. He is told to conquer his inner one. But no map is offered, only criticism when he fails to find the path. The consequence is evident: anxiety, isolation, emotional confusion. These are not mere personal issues. They are the symptoms of an archetype in collapse. When you erase a figure from history, you also erase the orientation it once gave. Men are no longer navigating by a fixed star, but by a sky that flickers, dim and disoriented. There is no going back to the past. But one must not pretend the past didn't exist. The mistake of modern culture is not that it challenges the masculine ideal. It is that it offers no coherent replacement. In dismantling the old statues, it forgot to give the man a new shape to aspire to. And without shape, without form, what can a man become except liquid, shapeless, formless, trying to fill the contours of whatever society pours him into in the past, a man proved his worth in the physical world, through labor, combat, discipline, and silence. His value was measured by what he did, not what he revealed. He carried his burdens privately, his wounds concealed behind armor made not of steel, but of stoic restraint. Visibility was not a virtue, discretion was. Vulnerability was a liability. To be known too deeply was to be exposed, and exposure was danger. But this has changed. The arena has shifted. Now, a man is called not to conceal, but to confess, not to hide pain, but to display it strategically, performatively, constantly. In this new landscape, everything is on display. Strength is no longer defined by what one can endure in silence, but how well one can articulate suffering with grace. Emotional literacy is currency, and the failure to communicate one's internal state is seen not as discipline but deficiency. Social capital is no longer earned only through competence. It is earned through self-revelation. To be seen is to be valid, but to be seen, one must often bleed in front of spectators. The digital age has turned every man into a performer. Social platforms have become the coliseum where personal narratives are crafted, curated, and consumed. Here, vulnerability is rewarded, but only if it fits the aesthetic of strength wrapped in softness. The man who shares his depression may be applauded, but only if he shares it with the right tone, the right filters, the right degree of resolution. There is a choreography to modern vulnerability. It must be digestible, palatable, marketable, and beneath the applause lies another demand. Perform again, show more, bleed brighter. Invisibility is death. In this new arena, visibility becomes pressure. A man is expected to be transparent, but not too raw. Open, but still in control. He must emote without unraveling, admit failure without losing status, confess flaws without appearing broken. This is not true openness. It is curated exposure, vulnerability with boundaries, emotion rehearsed for approval. The man becomes a spectacle not of power, but of process. He is praised not for victory, but for how well he narrates his struggles. The inner world becomes public property, and privacy becomes a form of betrayal to the collective gaze. This new performance of masculinity is double-edged. On one side, it allows for emotional complexity, a long-denied dimension of the male experience. On the other, it commodifies authenticity. The man who cannot or will not participate in this emotional exhibition finds himself dismissed, misunderstood, or invisible. Silence, once noble, now reads as avoidance. Composure, once admired, now reads as repression. The tools that built resilience in older generations are now reinterpreted as signs of fragility, and yet those same tools were once essential for survival. There is also an unspoken hierarchy in this new emotional economy. Not all vulnerabilities are valued equally. Some stories resonate, others repel. The man learns that certain feelings are marketable: anxiety, self-doubt, burnout, while others remain taboo. Rage, ambition, sexual frustration, and existential aimlessness. These are less welcome, less applauded, more dangerous. He is taught to confess pain, but only in the right dialect. If he speaks in the wrong emotional language, he is punished, ignored, or labeled. Thus, he edits himself not for truth, but for acceptance. The vulnerability becomes another mask, and through all this, the essential war remains internal. The modern man must balance visibility with survival. He must calculate what to reveal and what to protect. He is no longer simply fighting the world, he is fighting himself in front of an audience. He must learn to weaponize openness, to wear his trauma like armor, to bleed with strategy. For in this new arena, it is not enough to feel, it must be seen, shaped, shared, and sold in an age where the anchors of identity have been cut loose, where tradition no longer dictates direction and the archetypes of old have turned to dust. The man who waits to be told who he is will wait. Forever, to survive in this shifting landscape, he must obey a new and brutal law, the law of self-authorship. He must become the architect of his own identity, the author of his own myth, the sculptor of his own form. No one will hand him a role, no one will define him with clarity, and if he does not define himself, he will be defined, poorly, carelessly, and often destructively, by those who understand him least. From the moment a boy becomes conscious of himself, the world begins assigning scripts. Some subtle, others blunt. Be tough, be kind, be successful, be humble, lead, serve, dominate, yield. These commands, contradictory and relentless, splinter his sense of self. And unless he begins to write his own lines, he will spend his life performing roles written by others, parents, teachers, partners, institutions, cultures. Each script demands something different, and yet none of them ask what he truly is beneath the noise. He becomes a creature of reactions, not intentions. The law of self-authorship requires revolt against imitation, against passive acceptance, against the urge to conform for comfort. It demands an active confrontation with the self. Not the self as others see it, but the hidden self, the raw, unedited, often uncomfortable truths that lie beneath performance. This law is not about self-expression, it is about self-construction. Expression can be accidental. Construction is deliberate. The man must ask not, "Who am I?" but "What do I choose to be?" and then begin the ruthless process of becoming that. But construction implies resistance. The man who decides to author himself will be challenged at every step. The world is not kind to those who step outside the expected script. He will be misunderstood, mischaracterized, even mocked. But the pain of misunderstanding is lighter than the suffocation of misidentity. To write your own myth is to risk rejection, but to follow someone else's is to ensure self-erasure. The world does not reward authenticity. It tolerates it once it becomes legible. Until then, it punishes deviation with silence or ridicule. Self-authorship also means accepting full responsibility. There is no one to blame for the man who writes his own script. Every line, every choice, every direction becomes a reflection of his will. He cannot hide behind cultural expectations or familial guilt. He must forge a narrative that holds under scrutiny, not one that seeks approval. And to do this, he must become fluent in contradiction, strong yet soft, ambitious yet grounded, flawed yet deliberate. The coherent self is not a singular truth. It is a constellation of chosen traits held together by vision. To author oneself is not to reject the past, but to interrogate it. A man must examine the roles he inherited, the myths of masculinity, the lessons of boyhood, the traumas disguised as traditions, and decide which he will keep and which he will burn. He must be both historian and rebel. The past is a toolkit, not a prison. He can use what he needs, discard what he doesn't, and invent what he lacks. In doing so, he reclaims the throne of authorship and sits not as a passive reader of his life, but as its ruthless editor. This law is not reserved for the extraordinary. It is for any man who dares to ask what he is capable of beyond conditioning, but it requires solitude. It requires silence. The voice of the author cannot be heard while echoing the voices of others. In moments of doubt, it is tempting to return to borrowed scripts, to seek comfort in the known, but those who do will never be free. The man who refuses this law will live as a shadow, visible, even successful, but never whole. The man who obeys it, however painfully, begins the long journey toward truth. To be a man today is not to resurrect the past, nor to blindly follow the chaos of the present. It is to stand at the center of collapse, noise, and contradiction, and build. When the archetypes crumble, he must forge his own form. When vulnerability becomes currency, he must wield it without becoming dependent on its rewards. And when the world offers no script worth reading, he must take up the pen and write. This path is not clean. It will not come with applause. There will be no clear victories, only the quiet, enduring strength of a man who knows who he is, not because he was told, but because he decided. In a time that no longer defines him, his power lies in self-definition. In an age obsessed with being seen, his depth lies in seeing himself clearly, and in a world eager to name him, his freedom lies in naming himself first. This is the work now, not to mimic, not to perform, but to author, relentlessly, unapologetically, strategically. For the man who does this does not merely survive the age, he shapes it.